part of Psalm 2 is quoted in Acts verses 25 and 26. How did the early church understand Psalm 2? I just kind of left it as an open question there. Any thoughts or comments?
I believe that they understood that Pilate and the Gentiles and the Jews and so on actually carried out God's purpose.
There you go. And we see that when in what we read here, verse 27, Acts 4 verse 27, for of a truth against thy holy child Jesus, or thy holy servant, depending on your translation, whom thou hast anointed. Notice it says both Herod and Pontius Pilate with the Gentiles and the people of Israel were gathered together. And so he's saying that in light of him quoting from Psalm 2. And so let's actually turn back to Psalm 2.
That's great.
And I'd just like us to read through this. And so this was the psalm that was quoted from in Acts 4. And again, the church saw its ultimate fulfillment in Christ and the things that happened to Christ. And one thing we should understand when we look at prophecy in the Old Testament, a lot of times it has direct fulfillment in the Old Testament. And if this is David writing here, I believe it. These things did apply to King David in a certain respect. But often when you look at these prophecies, there's things they're prophesying about that in no way they could be completely fulfilled by the people who wrote them during this time. And so looking at Psalm 2 here, what stands out to you in this psalm, if anything? What interests you here?
First of all, it's a prophecy.
Yep, it's prophetic in a lot of ways.
It foretold what was going to happen when, against the Messiah.
Mm-hmm.
And so they didn't catch God off guard at all. He understood exactly what was going to happen.
Yes, that's a good point too, and I'd like to say something about that. A lot of people will say the church was a plan B, and that really that Jesus being crucified caught God off guard, and that simply is not true at all. And you can see that from the prophecies. I mean, even Isaiah is very specific. He was cut off from the land of the living.
He was preordained before the foundations of the earth as our Redeemer. So, no, we didn't take God by surprise.
So verse 11 spoke to me that it says, worship the Lord with reverence or fear. And sometimes we neglect in that.
Yeah.
Just like you pointed out, their prayer, they started their prayer out with reverence, by declaring God as the Creator. And we have to be sure we come with that same reverence when we come to worship.
Yep. That's a very good point. And, when Jesus gave the model prayer, he began it by saying, the King James, hallowed be thy name. So the idea is we are to keep God's name holy, to keep it respectful and keep it sacred. So that's a very good point. Some of the things that stood out to me when we look at verse 7, it says, I will declare the decree, and I like it because it rhymes in the King James, I'll declare the decree the Lord hath said unto me, thou art my son, this day I have begotten thee. And so again, there is some fulfillment, if David is writing here, there is some fulfillment in that, in David being a son of God in a sense. But again, that ultimate fulfillment is in Christ, that Jesus is truly the, if I can do some Greek, the monogenes, the only begotten Son of God, in the sense that he actually comes from God, that he is God in the flesh. Also verse 8, where it says, ask of me, and I shall give thee the heathen or the nations for thine inheritance, and the uttermost parts of the earth for thy possession. And, the kingdom is the church. That's something we've talked about quite a bit. And when you think about the church, when you think about the kingdom of Jesus Christ today, hasn't it, gone around the whole world? And I know everyone's not converted, but certainly we can say in, almost a literal sense that, people from every nation have been converted and become Christians and serve Christ and belong to Christ. And so all nations today serve Jesus Christ. And then the very last verse, you look at verse 12, we read about judgment and blessing in verse 12. Judgment and blessing, where it says, kiss the Son, and there's the idea of obeisance or paying Him homage, worshiping Him. Kiss the Son, lest He be angry, and His wrath is kindled but a little. And so there's the idea, if you don't show the king proper respect, the king, is going to judge you. But then it also says at the very end, blessed are all they that put their trust in Him. And so again, you see judgment, you see blessing there at the very end. So this is a very rich psalm. And again, the inspired writers of the New Testament are quoting this psalm, telling us it's fulfilled in Christ. And specifically, where it says in verse 1, why do they imagine a vain thing? The kings of the earth set themselves, and the rulers take counsel together against the Lord, against His anointed. And they said that referred to Herod and Pilate and the Jewish people, as well as them influencing the Gentiles to put Jesus to death on the cross.